What if the way women sometimes feel lost, maybe, unhappy? What if the root isn't what we usually think? What if it's this thing called subject objectification?
Subject objectification.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds pretty academic. I get it.
Right.
But the core idea is, well, simple enough. What if your identity isn't really built from your own internal plan?
Okay.
What if it's mostly shaped by you constantly trying to match up with, external expectations?
So not who you are deep down, but who you think everyone else needs you to be.
Exactly that. Imagine an actor, right? Their whole goal is just getting good reviews.
Mm-hmm.
But the directors keep changing. So they never dig into their own characters' inner life. They just react.
Becoming an object.
Defined by others.
Yeah.
Not a self, not a subject with their own drive.
So where does this perspective suggest this shaping started, historically speaking?
Well, our investigation points pretty strongly towards the rise of patriarchal societies.
Okay.
And specifically the establishment of private ownership, private property.
Private property. How does that connect? That seems like a jump.
It does, maybe. But we found analysis suggesting that as men started accumulating property, women's actual survival often became tied to aligning with a man, usually a husband, someone who controlled the resources.
So survival wasn't about your own skills, but about getting his approval, his protection.
That's the argument. Dependency. Traits that helped you thrive in that specific system, they became favored.
Favor how? You mean like personality traits?
Yes. Traits that help secure that approval, that protection, help with procreation within that structure. Yeah. Not necessarily what was, inherently female nature. More like adaptations.
Can you give an example? Maybe a surprising one, like physical traits. Could it go that deep?
Oh, absolutely. This is where some of the findings get really fascinating. One perspective suggests that traits we often think of as just feminine.
Yeah.
Inherently so.
Yeah.
A softer look, maybe a more delicate physique.
Yeah.
These might actually be adaptations, deep ones, shaped over millennia by those exact pressures.
Shaped by society, not just biology.
It appears that way, according to this view. We've seen data suggesting that since widespread private property really took hold, which is only a few thousand years, relatively speaking,
right,
the average height of women might have actually decreased significantly.
Decreased, wow. By how much?
Potentially 7 or 8 centimeters.
That's quite a bit. And a pretty short evolutionary time frame. It really challenges the idea that all physical differences are just set in stone from ancient times.
It does. It suggests societal structures themselves could act as a kind of selective pressure. If survival meant being chosen, being pleasing to the one holding the resources,
then traits seen as desirable in that system might get amplified.
Exactly. Now, it's worth saying, other research points to different factors for height changes too. It's complex. But this view draws a really provocative line straight back to social systems.
And what about the other way around? Different structures, like matriarchal societies.
Well, that's the interesting contrast, isn't it? In societies where maybe women held more control over resources, the pressures could flip.
Flip how?
Some evidence suggests the traits valued in men might shift, perhaps towards being more decorative or displaying strength in ways that attract female choice. It completely turns those standard assumptions about gender roles and even aesthetics upside down.
It really does. Okay, so let's bring this to right now. What does this subject objectification actually look like for a woman today?
It looks like being conditioned, often unconsciously, to constantly monitor the external gaze.
The gaze.
Yeah, your boss, your partner, society, social media,
Yeah.
constantly checking, am I doing it right? Am I fitting in? Always adapting to what others seem to want.
And the consequence of that is?
You lose touch with your own internal compass,
Yeah.
your subject, that external feedback loop.
Yeah.
It becomes your blueprint.
So instead of asking, what do I truly want?
You're asking what's expected of me? How should I look? What will get approval here?
Like that actor again.
Exactly. Building a life based on external scaffolding, with maybe not much internal structure holding it up. And this view argues even women who seem really successful,
Yeah.
they might still be operating this way, excelling at the role that's defined from the outside, but maybe not fully connected to their unique internal subject.
Okay, that connects to something else. This observation that women sometimes seem to have a perceived way out that men don't.
Nice.
Men face this pressure for external success, work, status. But women, there's often this option or perceived option of returning to the family, the home.
That way out.
Yeah.
Yes. But the analysis we're looking at frames that very differently.
How so?
Not as freedom, potentially as a trap. Some interpretations go so far as to call it an abyss.
An abyss, that's strong language. Why?
Because it's seen as just swapping one kind of dependency for another.
Okay.
Instead of relying on, say, external validation from work, you become reliant on a partner's, well, love, but also their resources, their approval for your basic security and well-being. And the really striking point here, the argument is, what's often being desperately sought in that situation isn't just fuzzy romance.
It's something more fundamental.
It's argued that it's actually a search for fundamental citizens' rights, basic human respect, having a voice in your own home, some control over resources, dignity as a right, not, a favor granted.
Wow. It's like needing actual food, real nourishment, but trying to survive on, I don't know, candy.
That's a great analogy. Seeking something, maybe love or romance, that can't actually provide the core sustenance that's missing. The autonomy, the agency, the basic rights.
So if dependency in various forms is the root issue here, how does this perspective suggest someone breaks free? How do you find that actual subject identity?
The conclusion presented is pretty direct. You have to break the dependency. Specifically, you need to cultivate the feeling and the reality that you can earn your own money, that you can survive independently.
So financial independence isn't just a lifestyle choice.
It's framed as the absolute foundation, the prerequisite for real selfhood. It's argued to be the fundamental path, the way you develop, assert, and actually live from your own core subjectivity, giving away that power, that independence. This viewpoint suggests it makes finding your true self incredibly difficult, maybe even impossible.
Wow. Okay. This deep dive has definitely shaken things up. We've touched on subject objectification, traced its possible roots way back to historical dependency.
Right, and how that might ripple out, shaping everything from physical traits potentially to how success is perceived today.
And how that apparent way out through relationships can actually be another form of dependency.
Where maybe the desperate need for basic rights gets masked as just a search for love.
It really leaves you with a powerful question, doesn't it? If so much of what society expects can seep in and shape our sense of who we are, how much of who you are right now is just a reflection of all that external shaping?
A tough one.
And maybe the even harder question is, how do you even start to peel back all those layers to find and then actually reclaim your own core independent subject identity?